Hello, happy new year. It's now 2019, which feels really weird. This video is going to be about books, because I have read 71 books this year, last year, and it's the most that I've ever read. Like, it's crazy, 71 books. So what I was going to do is do a little summary video of them all. I think what I'm going to do in the future is that after I've read one, I'm going to give the review straight away so it's fresh in my mind, because I can't remember them all. Which you're going to see now. I've got to use my phone to help me because I can't remember all of them, there's too many. But I've just done a review for Sapiens, so that's the last one that I read. It was really good in the sense of it's a really good kind of encapsulation of a lot of information about how we've evolved as a species and kind of how we're changing through history. My only bugbear with it is that it was a lot of stuff that I already knew. Like, I like to read things that I don't know about, and I find that increasingly more difficult to get out of a book because I've read so much, and I kind of, although my memory's not great, if I see something I remember that I already know it, so it kind of triggers it. So as long as I've got the triggers I can remember stuff, which is why I'm using my phone to help me with this video. But yeah, so a lot of the stuff, like when I was younger I was really kind of like interested in evolution of our species and where we'd come from and things like ice ages and stuff like that, so I used to watch a lot of documentaries on it. So a lot of the kind of beginning bits are all talking about like Homo sapien and Neanderthals and all that kind of stuff. Now, I've watched documentaries on when they've done archaeological digs and found skulls and cave paintings and all that kind of stuff. So I was already kind of familiar with it, and I've read Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, and I've read Richard Dawkins' Selfish Gene, and a lot of that stuff is talking about how we've evolved and what the purpose of our genes are and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of had that background in it already. I think what Sapiens does is it's kind of like it touches the surface on a lot of things but doesn't go into a lot of depth with stuff, which is fine if you're kind of like coming at it from an introductory point of view. So if you're interested in it, there are lots of other books out there that delve into them, into subject topics in more detail. So if you are interested, then do have a look at them. I got the audio version of the book. I don't know if there's like a note section of the actual book. I assume that there would be, because he does make reference to things like Dawkins and stuff, which obviously he talks about things like game theory and memes, but just really skates over them. And you know, it's a bit too much I think in Dawkins when he talks about memes and stuff, but it's an interesting concept that a lot of things now are in our minds and that we're keeping them alive in our minds. It's a really interesting chapter to read, but it is quite heavy, and I think the Sapiens book is really good at kind of keeping it light so that everyone can kind of follow it. It's not, you know, I wasn't challenged at all when I was listening to it. It wasn't kind of like getting me to really think about stuff in you know, a massive way. It had little, you know, tidbits where I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Things about how the genes in wheat have maybe kind of like manipulated us into creating an agricultural society for us. Like, we were thinking that it was better for us, but it wasn't, and it's actually better for the wheat because now wheat's really prosperous in the world. Really interesting that, like, how clever that is, if that's an actual thing, that genes do that. So overall, really good like summary of everything. It does also delve into kind of things like patriarchy and consumerism and individualism and all the kind of stuff within society that's really interesting, that has got a lot of, again, literature on it. A lot of dystopian fiction is around those kind of concepts, like 1984, Brave New World, all those kind of things. So again, a lot of them have been explored in other kind of areas, capitalism, stuff like that. Like, Ayn Rand's really good for capitalism, although she's like a staunch, I never get that word right, supporter of it, because she obviously comes from communism in Russia. So yeah, really kind of interesting how it talks about it, and right towards the end it starts talking about consciousness, which is more what I'm kind of interested in. So I don't know where to get the next book, but I'm thinking, based on some of the things that he talks about, I worry that he's not as well researched as what he should be in the depths of things like psychology and stuff, because he mentions about species communicating with each other through language, but there's really kind of a lot of research within language about what language is and how we come about it and why humans have it, that shows that our language is a little bit different to other animals, but you know, he doesn't really delve into that. He kind of assumes that it's the same, so that worries me slightly. But yeah, overall I would say that I gave it a 3 out of 5 because on Goodreads it goes from it was okay as 3, I really liked it as 4, and it was amazing as 5. Well, I did like it, but I didn't really like it. Like, there wasn't enough there to kind of grab my attention and be like, wow, this is like mind-blowingly amazing. Like, not many books do that anymore, so I don't think it's a criticism of the book. I think it's more like I'm expecting a lot more from what I'm reading, and I was a bit bored like towards the end. I was like, because I listened to it in a day, which is probably why, so it's probably not his fault. It's just my high standards. So yeah, it's worth a listen. You know, if you're not well read and you haven't read a lot of other things before, it'll probably be amazing and really new to you, because it'll be like, wow, this is like, you know, mind-blowing. But I have read quite a lot on it already, so it's kind of more like just a summary of everything. That was a really long review, wasn't it? Like, book 70, so it was, It's Not Always Depression, if you can see that. This one, yeah, I can't even remember how many stars I get this one. I've kind of read quite a lot of books this year about how depression is caused by things other than what we think it is. So a lot of the kind of emphasis in society at the minute is that it's caused by biochemical, you know, neurotransmitters in the brain, whatever. Not enough serotonin if you've got depression, too much GABA, or maybe imbalances in serotonin if it's anxiety, you know, all that kind of stuff. Too much dopamine if it's a psychotic disorder. But there's not really any kind of empirical scientific evidence that it actually works. So a lot of people taking SSRIs, so selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which block the reuptake channels on your presynaptic neuron, so that it gives you more chance to kind of have the serotonin in your synaptic gaps. It gets absorbed by the postsynaptic neuron. So the idea is that this serotonin is supposed to relieve the symptoms of depression or whatever, but they don't have any kind of evidence for that as such. There's no causality. It's like, really, you know, so there's a lot of books at the minute that are about more like they're in a therapeutic angle. This book kind of talks about a different type of therapy called AEDP, so it's called Accelerated Experiential Dynamic Psychotherapy, which to me sounded a lot like Internal Family Systems. So I don't know if you watched the film Inside Out with like cartoon characters, where it's like all different parts of the mind. It's kind of like that. The suggestion is that in your mind you've got like different versions of yourself. So you've got you know, like 5-year-old you that had like a traumatic experience, and that because at 5 you didn't understand like why things were happening, you've still got kind of that emotions you've not kind of dealt with because you couldn't when you were that young. So it's almost like trying to look after that part of yourself and kind of soothe it, so that you then get over that trauma. It talks a lot about a change triangle. It was really difficult on audio because I didn't have it in front of me, and it says, you know, see associated PDF, but there never is a PDF. I don't know where Audible store these PDFs, because I've read about 5 books now that say PDF and there is no PDF. So it was really difficult to kind of think about this change triangle, and it was almost like it was oversimplifying it. It was like suggesting that you could actually change things on your own. Like, I feel like you would need a therapist to kind of guide you through that, because I'm really bad at kind of decoding my defensive behaviour and inhibitory emotions and core emotions. Like, I can kind of do it on reflection, but trying to do it in the moment is like really challenging. So yeah, and it was just like, I've read other books that were really good, and this one, it was okay. So yeah. Oh, and that was the other thing. It was suggesting to kind of like talk to like the 5-year-old you that was like suffered this trauma, but there's a lot of research which suggests that you create false memories by doing things like that. A lot of, like, you know, people who have said that they've been abused when they were children, some of those people, it turned out years later they'd created like a false memory of it, and things like, you know, families have been torn apart and stuff because they'd had this false memory that it was like a family member that had done it and they hadn't done anything. So it worries me that I think the mind's too delicate to be kind of using therapy like that when we don't really understand what it's doing. and that you could actually create trauma for yourself and more problems for yourself than actually getting rid of like your emotions and stuff. I was a bit iffy about that one. Book 69 was Grit, The Power of Perseverance and Passion and Perseverance by Angela Duckworth. I don't even know if you can see these. I was so disappointed by this one because obviously I'm in education, and it's kind of suggesting that the reason why people are successful and people aren't successful is if they've got grit. So grit is kind of, I mean, the Duckworth suggests that it's like a thing on its own, but I think she's kind of misguided. I think she's obviously done some research and she's found some kind of commonalities and some correlations, but actually when you look into her research, the correlations are really small. They're like 0.2 or something. It's ridiculous. Like a good correlation is 1 and she's 0.2. It's like, how can you create this theory and suggest you found something amazing when your correlations are so low? There's a big trait, 5 big trait, no, what's it called? 5 big trait person, what did I call them? The Big 5 personality trait questionnaire is about like 5 key factors that make up everyone's personality, and actually what they found is that conscientiousness is a bigger predictor of success. Like if you're really conscientious, then you end up achieving more and doing better. And if you think about it, to be conscientious you would probably have some grit. It's just a little bit like, I feel, you know, that she talks about athletes and stuff as well, like, oh, they've got grit. It's like, well, no, they're probably just really disciplined. Like, disciplined people do well. So why is she calling it grit? Because grit's kind of like, almost like she's saying, like, it's sticking power, like where you persevere, but you need a lot of combination of things. I feel like she just clubbed it all together because she hasn't really analysed it properly. And it really bugs me that people that do research in education don't realise the kind of impact that they have in education, because she's gone about saying, oh yeah, it's great. So now everyone in education is going to, like, teachers and things are going to be like saying, oh yeah, it's great and whatever, and then 10 years down the line it's going to realise that it actually isn't that. It just messes everything up. It's just like, people need to like look at research better and not just accept what's written in a book. So yeah, she annoys me because I just think she doesn't realise kind of the negative impact that she's having on education, and people who aren't kind of smart enough to look at the actual correlations and things, I'm not going to find, like, it's just rubbish. Book 68. So let's go into bed, so I'm going to be quiet. Is The Power of Habit, which, again, I thought this was going to be really, really good, because it was all about, like, how do you change habits, how do you get better, that kind of thing, but it just suggests that you've basically got a cue, a routine, and then a reward for a behaviour, for any behaviour that you do. And so if you can hack it and replace the routine with something else that you want to do, then you'll get a different, every time there's that cue, you'll do a different routine and then you'll get a different reward from it, so you can change your habits in that way. But again, it means like analysing your behaviour and like what your cues are, like what's triggering your behaviour, to be able to then kind of readdress that and hack that and change that. So it's a bit like complicated in that sense. Not that great. I've set up shop somewhere else so I can talk. So we got up to Quiet by Susan Cain, which is a really, really good book if you are an introvert, because it kind of talks about how in society presently we're kind of surrounded by extroverted people, and how it's kind of a value to be outgoing and talkative and really confident and gregarious and things like that, and it kind of neglects all the kind of people who aren't like that, who actually feel quite uncomfortable like being the centre of attention. You know, if you think of like celebrities and stuff like that, everyone wants to be the centre of attention, everybody wants that praise and that kind of acknowledgement, whereas introverted people are quite modest and kind of retiring and shy and don't want to kind of be put in the spotlight and find that really uncomfortable, and actually are the best selves when there's like 1 or 2 people around, not a big group of people. And so introverted people always kind of seem like they're not very interesting and they're very quiet and stuff, but actually they're the people that are the most interesting. Like, they have the most to talk about and know the most things, and yeah. So it was really interesting to read it, because I was getting quite annoyed actually about how my own introversion was getting in my way a little bit, and I was finding it really difficult to kind of enjoy socialising with people, because I'm a social person, but I like to spend some time on my own. So I was feeling a little bit like, oh, I'm a bit weird or whatever. I'm a bit antisocial, and I was thinking, no, actually, like, there's lots of people like me. And I think it's funny because the person that recommended it to me at work is also an introvert, and he was like, when he read it, he said, oh, finally there's other people like me, and that's what it made me feel like too. So if you are an introvert, then definitely read it, because it'll make you feel better about being a bit marginalised by our society as it currently is. You know, people banging on about teamwork and working with other people all the time. It's like, Jesus Christ, just let me work on my own. Like, I need better on my own. I don't want to work with other people. Like I can work with other people, obviously, and sometimes I even enjoy working with other people, but when you've got lots of weak people, like, it brings you down, and you don't do good work because you're always cleaning up their mess and stuff, and it's just infuriating. It's like, not everyone is as conscientious as an introvert, let's put it that way. So yeah, it was a really good book, so I put a good review on for that one. What was the next one? Okay, so Decoding the Workplace. This was like really interesting. It was talking about like how people behave at work, and how some people are like not themselves and like manipulate their behaviour to kind of get ahead and stuff. It's interesting because if you watch people and how they're behaving, you can see them doing it, and I wonder, like, do people realise that they're doing it, or is it kind of just they just don't realise and they're just behaving like pre-programmed apes in this situation, like how to advance in a hierarchy like chimpanzees do, or is it actually like well thought out? Like, are they really that smart? Like, I don't know if they are. What can I put on here? They were talking as well about teamwork and how in the workplace, like, everyone's all up for meetings, but really don't realise how much of a colossal waste of time meetings are. It's like, if companies were to pay you by the hour, and you think about how many people are in a meeting, like, how much time are you wasting, how much productivity are you wasting by having that meeting, when just because it's scheduled in every week that we're having it. Like, people do meetings but they don't have agendas. Like, I've genuinely sat in a meeting with no agenda, and I've sat there and I've listened to what's been discussed, and I've thought to myself, this is of no relevance to me. I cannot help in any way because you haven't given me an agenda previously, so I don't know what we're discussing. I'm kind of like reflective, I need to think about things, so to just put me in a meeting and just ask my opinion on something, it's like, well, I kind of like to think about it first. You know, if you want my input on something, great, let me know beforehand, like, what is the meeting for? And you know, other times it's been like, we've had a meeting and people have turned up late for the meeting, or like, you know, it's just bizarre to me that people have meetings so often. Like, it's a complete waste of time that you literally could have told me in 5 minutes. I'll post it now on an email, whatever. I appreciate face-to-face contact, but you could have talked to me as we were walking down the corridor about it, and not sat me in a meeting for an hour. So yeah, I found that interesting. It was talking as well about like unnecessary teamwork, and how things like brainstorming is actually really unproductive, and how it doesn't get you the desired outcome. If you watch any episodes of like The Apprentice and stuff, you'll see where brainstorms do not work, and they come up with absolutely ridiculous ideas that are not well thought out. So it was like saying, you know, teamwork's really good in certain instances, but not in others. Like, you're forcing people to work together who don't gel and who don't trust each other and who don't respect each other as well. That's a massive thing. It's like, teamwork's not going to happen if that is the case. It's, you know, like, it's not about making people work as teams, it's about making people value each other and their contributions and their strengths and weaknesses. And if that's not happening, if people are being quite competitive and stuff, then teamwork's never going to work. So that was interesting. What else was it talking about? Oh yeah, it was talking about how like people try and suck up to bosses, and like, I've seen it myself. Like, I've seen people like complimenting bosses on certain things, and you're like, I just look at them and go, are you for real? Like, everyone can see you doing that. Like, you know, can your nose be any further from their arse? Like, it's just weird, isn't it, that people do that? Like, they don't have enough value in themselves as an employee that they need to kiss someone's ass to get ahead. But it doesn't work. Like, people see through it and people see what you like you don't get ahead like that, really. So that was book 66. Book 65 was The Element, How Finding Your Passion Changes Everything. Now this is by Ken Robinson, and Ken Robinson did a really, really good TED talk on educational paradigms and how education and the model of education is kind of based on when it got introduced in the Industrial Revolution. So it gone from like no education, or like education for the upper classes, and like, I guess, church pastoral education, pastor education, that kind of thing, and how in the Industrial Revolution the education revolution happened and everyone's kind of been educated in Victorian times, that kind of stuff, but how it's kind of like a conveyor belt system, and that everyone's like a one-size-fits-all, and you sit people in a classroom, and how ADHD is a product of society, not of a brain disorder, and you know, not everybody's meant to sit in a classroom for 8 hours a day or whatever, 6-7 hours a day. So he's really an interesting and kind of, you know, obviously very intelligent person, and when I was first reading the book it was really interesting because he was talking about how to find your elements. Your elements, like your passion, what makes you like get into flow. So there's another book which I read earlier on the Eco Flow, which I'll talk about later on. A lot of books seem to be referencing it like everywhere. It's funny that I've read so many books this year that have referenced each other, which shows that we're getting quite a lot of overlap in the literature that's out at the minute. People are cashing in on interesting subjects but actually not saying anything new on there, which is quite disappointing, because if you're buying like multiple books and they all say the same thing, it's like, what's the point? But actually at the end of it I felt quite depressed, because it was like, I'm at a kind of stage now where I'm at a crisis point where I found my element, which was teaching, and I was good at it, and time passed really quickly when I was doing it, and I enjoyed it, and I loved going to work, but it's I'm kind of losing that a little bit. I'm wondering whether it's time to change careers, whether it would be better finding something else. But then I think, what on earth would I do? Like, I don't even know anymore like what I would enjoy. Like, I really love books obviously, but can I get a job in books? Like, I don't know. So it kind of like neglects the fact that a very small percentage of people find something that they really enjoy doing and they really want to spend the rest of their life doing that element. Like, not many people find that. So to write a book where it talks about all these people that have found it, that are enjoying life, and like, you know, Richard Branson and Elon Musk and all the kind of people that like, do really well, they found the passion and whatever, and it's like, not everybody finds that, and it's like, it's almost like put on you that the reason you haven't found it is you. Like, it's up to you to find it. It's like, oh, I can't find it, I don't know what it is. And I think a lot of people feel like that. Like, they feel like they should be finding something that they're really passionate about, but they don't know what it is. It's like, you know, some people are passionate about video games. Like, you know, I guess you can make a career out of that, but come on, like, some people are passionate about singing, but not everyone can be a singer. Like, it's kind of, I don't know, what if I were to, I forget what I've done. It's like, he's really advocating like entrepreneurship. It's like, you know, if everyone in the world was an entrepreneur, we wouldn't have anybody left to do all the other jobs. Like, you can't, you know, everyone wanting to be famous, everybody wanting to do this, everyone wants to do that, all that, wanting the same jobs. Like, for us as a society to function, we need different people in different roles. And if, you know, you can be passionate about being a bin man, awesome, but is that a reality? Like, is that really something that you're going to want to be doing? I don't know. So I was a little bit kind of like trepidatious about that. Like, is that really a realistic thing to think that we're all going to find our passion and we're all going to be, like, I thought I'd found mine and now I don't feel the same, like, it's not lasted. So it's like, what, am I going to find something else? Like, people say now that you can have like 7 career changes in your life. Like, I'm going to have to change 7 times to just keep the passion alive. Like, what's the point? Like, I don't know. Book 64. So this was The Wisdom of Psychopaths by Kevin Dutton. This was really good actually, because it's funny because everyone is so fascinated by psychopaths, but if you actually kind of knew what was happening in the psychopath's brain, you'd be less kind of fascinated by it. Like, a psychopath literally, and just to clarify as well, people who use psychopath and sociopath interchangeably, they're not the same thing. They're not like, you know, one's an American one's an English one. No, a psychopath is born that way, a sociopath is made by trauma. So a sociopath still has the kind of potential to be a human, feeling human. I mean, what's a human? That was probably the wrong thing to say. But essentially a psychopath just has reduced activation in the amygdala, which is the emotional region of the brain. They also have different levels of activation in the prefrontal cortex, which is for decision making. Highly intelligent, like, the only thing that's different about them is that they don't feel human emotions. And actually, if you think about it, wouldn't it be great not to feel emotions? Like, to do something and not feel guilty about it, to do something and not care about it, like, to not ruminate and think about things over and over again. Like, wouldn't that be awesome? I thought what was really interesting is that you can actually get transcranial magnetic stimulation to kind of stimulate, that's the wrong word, to simulate being a psychopath, so you can actually feel like a psychopath temporarily for like an hour. Like, how awesome is that? Like, well, I was going to say I would be well up for that, but I think that would get quite addictive, wouldn't it? Because it'd be like, you know, wouldn't you even remember it afterwards? Like, it's crazy to actually feel no emotions. Like, it's not even possible. Like, have you ever gone a time where you've not felt any emotions? Can you imagine that? Like, it is kind of bizarre, isn't it? But I think that he's right. Psychopaths have a lot of wisdom, and that they don't care about anybody else. They don't care about what anyone else is doing. They live their life and they're happy with their life, and they don't give a shit about anything. Like, how great would that be? Like, a lot of human folly is other people. Like, Sartre himself said, hell is other people, and he's so fucking right. Book 63. So the Tibetan book of living and dying. I was so disappointed with this book. I thought it was the Tibetan book of dying, like the sacred text of, you know, what's it say, Buddhism, but it wasn't. And so it was like, what did I even, yeah, I couldn't, very heavily accented narration. Like, I think the guy was Indian. Couldn't tell what he was saying some of the time, so I had to keep going back to listen to it again. And it was just really boring and really dry, and I was like drifting off and having to go back again. I was like, for God's sake. It's basically just talking about how to deal with death and what to do after death. You know, a lot of Western culture kind of just ignores death and doesn't talk about it or think about it or anything like that, so it was more kind of like trying to make that person feel better about dying and what happens afterwards, and if anything happens afterwards. But it was very repetitive, not very engaging. Don't listen to that book. Book 62, Become Myself by Irvin D. Yalom. I thought that this was a psychiatrist. Talking about his therapy, because I've read books like that. The Examined Life last year, or was it earlier this year? It was last year, which was really good. And a lot of the memoirs that I've read that have been about psychiatry and having disorders and stuff have been really interesting, but this one was literally about his life. So there's a little bit of therapy in there. It was a little bit talking about how he's become himself, how he's kind of become enlightened a little bit, which was interesting. But he's had such a charmed life. Like, he's published loads of books, his wife is really intelligent, has published loads of books, lectured at universities and stuff, and they've got loads of children. They're always, you know, flying from America to England to wherever to kind of live temporarily, and it's like, yeah, it was very intelligently autobiographical, which put me off. He's told a lot about himself, which obviously is a memoir, but like, I need something else in there to kind of keep me interested. Silent Guides by Professor Stephen Peters, of book 61. I was so disappointed by this one as well. I've got like a run of bad books. Like, I read The Chimp Paradox, I think last year, and that was awesome. Like, when I was reading that, this is really good because it's a way of kind of simplifying what's going on in your brain in terms of like the neurosciences behind it. So it talks about like having a chimp, which is like the limbic part of your brain, and then it talks about the computer, which is like all your stored kind of routines and memories, procedural memories, all that kind of stuff, and the human and stuff, and the gremlins through the machines. So really interesting. But this one was literally just similar stuff, and it says on the front, understanding and developing the mind throughout life. So I was thinking, okay, it's talking about how the brain changes over time with development, but that's not what it was at all. Like, it literally was how to interface with a child and how to access the child's chip and the child's computer and the child's human. And it was like, I'm not interested in the child, like I'm interested in my own brain. Like, it should say on the front for parents or for interacting with children. Like, it's really, you know, misguided labelling that, because that's not what it was. And even on the back it doesn't say anything about that. I think they've done that on purpose to go off the back of the chimp paradox, that everyone will buy it and then realise actually this is not relevant to me at all. I'm not impressed with that. Book 60, Buddhism for Busy People. Now, this is okay if it, I mean, it was written 14 years ago, and I think 14 years ago, probably really good. It's talking about like mindfulness and being in the now and staying present and stuff like that, and kind of how so you talk about suffering. Yeah, it's got some Buddhist principles in the book. It's very anecdotal. It's not substantiated by any kind of research or evidence or anything like that. And it's kind of like, I always think with Buddhism, it's very easy to be mindful and present when you're a monk who meditates most of the day. Like, if that was all that you were doing in life, then yeah, I'm really a lovely, happy person too. But when it's in the actual reality of everyday life, when it's a frenetic pace, frenetic pace, like, you can't, like, your brain isn't wired to behave like that. Like, you've got fight-flight responses just triggering off every time there's a threat everywhere. Like, you can't be like, oh wait, I'm mindful, I'm being Buddhist. It's just a bit unrealistic, I think. I'd love to see a monk in everyday life, like, just going about his business, having a stressful work life, and see how long he stays in Buddhist for. The Water Cure, so book 59 by Sophie McIntosh. It's a debut novel, and it was really good. I read this one for my book club. I'm very happy that it was dystopia. It's not like many dystopias in the sense that it is in its own little bubble, but it is kind of like, it was interesting because you didn't know where they were, what time it was. You didn't know in the past, it was in the future, it was in the present. You didn't know how old the girls were in it. There's a lot of kind of like twists and turns where you're still kind of a bit unsettled and you're not really sure what's going on. And it's like everything's like, the setting's really gothic. It's like a abandoned place and it's all misty and it's like on a cove by the sea, and it's just like, yeah, very dark, very kind of, it reminded me of Wuthering Heights when Heathcliff is like torturing animals and stuff. And yeah, Kathy loves him, so it was just reminiscent of that a little bit. But yeah, it was really good. It reminded me of another book as well. I can't remember what other book it was. Oh, Lolita. It reminded me of that very much. How I don't want to spoil it in case you read it because it's really good, but it's how you can be outwardly an age, but inwardly your mind might not be of that age, and that you can be quite naive and not realise. Saying that it reminded me of Lolita because you could be one age kind of like outwardly, but internally you could be quite naive and not realise how your behaviour could be eliciting different responses in different people in different ways. If you've read Lolita, you'll know what I mean. So yeah, the psychology behind that I found really kind of like fascinating to read. She did it kind of like really well. It's got so much happening, like loads of books. This is taking ages as well, by the way. I thought this was going to be like a really short, like, oh, these are the books that I've read, and this is taking ages. So book 58 was The Paradox of Choice. This was we're not really in control of our choices that often, and it's substantiated by some empirical research, although I did say at the end that it probably would have benefited from more and less anecdotal, because it got quite anecdotal towards the end. But it referenced kind of some research that I'm aware of, which is like it's like a jam tasting experiment where if there's like, I don't know, if you taste some jam, there's like 10 different flavours, and they ask them if they want to buy any, they're less likely to buy than if there's like 3 flavours, because if there's too many choices you become overwhelmed and you become kind of like choice paralysis, it's called, kind of paralysed by that all those different options, so you don't make a choice. And they've done it at various different times, various different experiments and find similar things, and it made really good kind of parallels with society, in that nowadays we have so many choices that we can make. We're so free to make so many choices that it leaves us with this kind of unsettling feeling of, are we making the right choice, and you know, it paralyses us into making any choices because we've got so many. And if you think about like 50 years ago, it was pretty kind of straightforward. Like, you would leave school at 16, you would go get a job quite locally, you would marry somebody quite locally, you have children, and then you were kind of like set up, so there wasn't much choice. You know, you couldn't decide where you wanted to live in different cities, live across the world. Like, you didn't have as much financial power as what you've got now, or financial freedom, if you will. And like, to go into different jobs, and you know, you can go to university, you can do, you know, like whatever you want to do, but the choice, there's so much choice that we tend to get paralysed in those choices and feel like, should we make that choice? Is that the right choice to make? So it was interesting for that reason. If you've not, you know, heard of any of the literature about choices and being determined by them, then it's worth a read. Personally, I'd kind of heard a lot of it already, like doing psychology, so it was okay. 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. I said that better last time. This is by a Japanese writer. This is by a Japanese writer. I don't know what it is about Japanese culture, but it's quite objectifying the female characters. It really felt like I was reading soft porn at times, and I was just a bit like, is that really necessary to go into that much detail, like about how short this girl's skirt is and how big her boobs are? Like, the I want to say lead character, but the protagonist, one of them, she was obsessed with the fact that her boobs weren't very big, and I was just like, really? Is that really important? Like, is that necessary? Like, do we need to kind of focus on the fact that she needs to have big boobs? Like, and just like the whole kind of, you know, lesbian fantasy of, it was almost like it was this guy's like porn dreams, like in his book. It's like, you know how anime is like objectifying of female characters, you know, very kind of tall, lean, kind of big-breasted kind of characters. It was kind of like that. It also is a bit far-fetched. Like, there was these 2 characters who, when they were 10 years old, they held hands, and then 20 years later they're both still in love with each other, and then they get together and then they're in love. And I'm like, dude, it doesn't happen like that. Like, that's not what happens. Like, it takes a really long time to fall in love with somebody. Like, that's not how it happens. So yeah, it felt like the author was a bit naive, or maybe he's just writing for naive audiences. Like, I don't know. Like, it was just bizarre. And I thought I was getting on money's worth because it was like 46 hours of audio, and I was just like, why did I do that to myself? Like, it wasn't worth it. I shan't be reading any more like that. Book 56 was called Surviving by Ellen Lester. Somebody bought me this book. I would never have picked this book to read because it was about expats in Rome who were part of Alcoholics Anonymous, and how, like, they were just all sleeping with each other and like arguing and drinking and falling off the wagon and stuff, and then they killed somebody. They hid the body, and it's like, that's the whole story. And like the killed another person, and it was like the last couple of chapters, and it was like, what the hell, I actually read this whole book, what for? Like, it was not very good. And he's got a really kind of clipped staccato style of writing with a lot of dialogue, so it's really difficult to follow at first and to get in that rhythm of the way that he writes, so I didn't kind of enjoy that much. Office Politics by Oliver James. This was really kind of disturbing when I read it, because I read this one before, the Decoding Workplace Behaviour one, and I was like, what? As if these people exist, like, surely not. Like, I don't know, maybe my workplace is okay, like, but workplaces like this, like, they do say that it's more likely to occur in workplaces like in lawyers and at the media and stuff like that, so maybe it's just that it does actually say that teachers are less triarchic than other professions, so, you know, maybe my workplace is okay, but it talks about triarchic people, so it talks about, what does it say? I can't even remember. It's like 3 types of people. I think it's like psychopathic, narcissistic, and Machiavellian, that was it. And how, like, they try to do things to kind of get to people, and I'm like, why would you bother? Like, why would you bother? What is the point? Like, are you really like that rotten inside that you get your kicks from bringing other people down? Like, that's bizarre behaviour. What does it say? Oh, it's quite like, oh yeah. I've probably not done a very good review on that, to be honest, because it was interesting, like, reading about it, but I've kind of talked about, like, my own experience in the workplace where I have worked with people who have been quite, like, nasty, to be honest, and have tried to, like, undermine other people and kind of, you know, claim credit for other people's work and kind of, like, say they'll do something but then don't, like, in terms of contribution to a team, and it's like, yeah, and there's like little gossip that's said to certain people about certain things, and, you know, people just believe it, don't they? So yeah, I guess it does happen. Yeah, I kind of put at the end, like, if anyone's making work difficult for you, then stay away from them, because they just want to bring you down. They'll bring anyone down. I think it's quite sad, really, isn't it, that the only way that you can feel better about your contributions to, like, undermine someone else's. Like, why do people do that? It's like, just be better. Like, just be better. So that was 55. Book 54 was called Attached. So this was about, like, attachment styles in childhood. A lot of research into, like, whether you're securely attached to your caregivers when you're younger, or whether you're insecurely attached, and you can be insecurely attached in an anxious way or in an avoidant way, or a mixture of the two. And it's not even by, like, your caregivers, it can be like any friendships that you had in childhood or whatever that kind of caused it. I'm touching my nose because I was going to share something personal and I decided not to, like, decode my body language. It's interesting when you know psychology and you look at people's tells and you're like, ah, you just lied to me then. And I know you did. Oh, that was a half-truth. Yeah. And it's very uncomfortable to communicate with people because you can see that they're full of shit. But anyway, yeah, it's interesting how attachment styles in our childhood can make it difficult to attach to people who are adults, and if we don't kind of, like, address those or, like, communicate properly about those, then it makes relationships difficult. Like, I know me personally, like, if I feel like someone is too close to me, I withdraw and I'm like, leave me alone. And I don't know why I do it, but I do it all the time. Like, I need people to be there and to make effort, but not too much effort, because then that pushes me away. So, but then if the person doesn't show enough effort, then I'm like, oh my gosh, see you later. So you end up not getting close to anybody because you're constantly, like, pushing them away and letting them in, pushing them away, but it's just what I do. At least I'm aware of it, I can communicate that, which I don't think other people are aware that they do it. Like, I know people that kind of like will try and get really close to you, and as soon as they get a little bit close, then they just kind of leave, and you're like, what's that? Like, but then they might be psychopathic, so, you know, or just manipulative. Narcissistic probably is more likely description of those types of people. Yeah, I kind of was talking as well about how we've got quite a conservative culture, so people don't kind of admit like when they need somebody and when they feel vulnerable and things, and actually that's the only way to connect with people. Book 53 was called The Courage to Be Disliked. By what looks like, Japanese writers. We talk about Adler. Adler's kind of like Adler. But Adler is like talking about like unconscious mind stuff like Jung does. Adler and Jung are not really kind of prolific in psychology when you actually get taught about it at university, but coming to it later on, they seem to be the most like influential to me. But I think that's because it's a more spiritual and holistic way of thinking rather than scientific, which is what psychology is kind of going down that route. It's like psychedelic psychology. It's supposed to be unscientific, so it's not really focused on that much, so you don't really learn that much about Freud on your degree really, because it's not substantiated by empirical research, so any of the unconscious stuff is kind of just avoided because they can't explain it. But it says something, this one says that your mind creates symptoms so that you have an excuse for not doing something. So you know, like, I'll say like you're tired, your mind's creating that you're tired so that you don't want to go for a run, or like you create anxiety because then that will justify why you don't do something. And things like, what does it say here? So one example is a blushing woman, and she used blushing as an excuse not to reveal her feelings for a man that she liked, by telling herself that as soon as she got rid of her blushing problem, she would tell him how she feels. But actually she was controlling the blushing, because if she carried on blushing, that would mean that she wouldn't have to tell him, and she wouldn't have to face that kind of potential rejection from him. So that meant that she didn't have to tell him she had to face the rejection, but she carried on blushing. So it's almost like you have certain things that you do that's to try and prevent you from feeling worse, and that if you take them away, then you could be like opening yourself up to a lot of trauma. Additionally, if you make excuses such as not having time, work is getting in the way, or you'll do it as soon as you'll finish something else, you are actually participating in avoidant behaviour. I do that a lot. And it also talks about theories of inferiority and superiority complexes. It's basically suggesting that you should kind of like just accept who you are and don't care if someone doesn't like you. Like, it's that kind of seeking of acceptance from others that is the root cause to all your issues. Like, if you just kind of are happy with how you are and just give a shit, then you'll be fine. But what I did say is that it kind of mimics Plato's style of writing. It's very kind of like question and answering. But because I was listening to it on audio, it was quite difficult to follow. So I was just a bit like, well, you just kind of like write a sentence. So apart from that, yeah, it was alright. But it was interesting for the Adler bit because I didn't know about Adler before. Book 52, Our Age in Britain. And this is really good if you know nothing about Britain. I kind of know a lot about like all the different lobes and hemispheres and different bits and what jobs they do and stuff like that. Like, I learn about all that stuff at university. I teach that stuff now. Like, to me that's kind of, you know, just standard psychology. So it was kind of going through all of that, but what was really good about this book was that even though I know all that stuff, there was still stuff that it told me that I didn't already, well, not that I didn't already know, but like it contextualised things for me, so it made me think about them in different ways. So it kind of added to what I already know, and it clarified as well the difference between autobiographic and episodic memory, which I wasn't completely au fait on. Like I knew the kind of difference, but it did it in a way that was like really easy to understand, which I've forgotten, which is really bad, isn't it? But what I do remember is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia, because I didn't know what the difference was between those two, and students have asked me in the past and I've gone, I feel like the same thing, which they are. But yeah, I understand now like what the difference is, because one's just an umbrella term for lots of other things that are in it, and also as well. Oh yeah, and Fiascade is a really famous example of somebody's damaged the prefrontal cortex, but there's another example of somebody else who I hadn't heard of before, so that was really good as like an extra kind of example. So yeah, if you're interested in like the brain and neurons and cognitive function, epigenetics and brain plasticity, it's a good book to read. Book 51, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. So yes, definitely wanted to read that. It's got a really good quote from Charles what's he called? Bukowski, who's a really good like poet, and his poetry is really good because it's quite nihilistic actually, which is not great for your mind, but he speaks the truth. But the king of not giving a fuck, he really doesn't. Like, he just smokes and drinks and falls asleep and, you know, talks about life like that. Yeah, it's kind of like questioning why we care about stuff, like why are we bothered? Like, what is the point of bothering? Like, you know, some people are kind of really driven to write about things, but why? What's the point? Why do you care so much? Like, what are you trying to prove to yourself by trying to be right? Like, I know quite a few people that are, you know, they're convinced that they're right about stuff, and they'll argue tooth and nail about it, but you kind of think, is this because you have an inferiority complex? Like, but what are you trying to prove? What are you trying to prove with your own point of view? Like, can you not just accept that we think in different ways? Like, what are you doing that for? Why do you care? It's talking a lot about like values and how happiness is achieved through problem solving and through suffering and failure, and thus you need to suffer to be happy, and not trying to think, oh, I'm not happy, and that's a problem. Like, it's more like, oh yeah, I'm suffering, but that's making me happy because I'm problem solving. My brain's evolved to problem solve. So it's kind of like almost like reframe a new kind of view on that. And let's talk about like how you approach your choices, and that, you know, two people are affected in the same way, and that actually you should logic check what you're saying. Like, if you've got an intuition about something and you're like, this person's like manipulative, not very nice, then question it and going, okay, you could be right, and what are the consequences of being right? You'll be hostile to them, they'll be hostile to whatever. What if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? What's the consequences of that? Because if that person's not like that and you thought they were like that and behaved like that to them, then that's more of a consequence to you. So it might be better to just pretend that they're not like that. Like, does that give you any consequence? You know? So it's kind of like, maybe your intuition isn't always right, maybe you should logic check it sometimes, and that you should just kind of just accept that things are as they are, and just be like, yeah, that person's a psychopath, okay, that's fine, it's not causing me any harm, she's not causing me any harm. Book 50 was Killing Eve, Gordon and Villanelle, so I'd watch the TV series, absolutely loved it, thought that it was absolutely amazing. Again, she's a sociopath, not a psychopath, and because she cried a little bit, so you know, and she's had trauma in her life. But anyway, when I saw that the book was on the shelf in the supermarket, I was like, oh, it's a book. So I got it and read it and thought, oh my god, like, it's not very good. Basically, like, obviously it starts off like the foundations of Killing Eve are still there in the book, but it kind of, all the bits that the TV show changed made it better, and so because that was lacking in the book, it meant that it wasn't kind of as good. But I went to my book club, and this was the first book that they were discussing, and what I realised from that discussion was that it's actually supposed to be a parody of James Bond, and how James Bond just kind of like is quite sociopathic and doesn't really give a shit about anyone, and kind of just like sleeps with everybody, and so Villanelle's kind of doing the same in the series and stuff, and how there's somebody who's obviously working for an organisation that's just kind of puppeteering her in the same way that they do in James Bond. So, and how like she's obsessed with like clothes and, you know, fashion and stuff. It's kind of, it's funny now to like understand that that's what the aim of it was. So like I didn't feel like it went into enough characterisation depth, but neither does James Bond. So it's like that's the point of it. So I guess when you understand that, you then have less expectations of those things, and so it kind of makes sense. So if you've watched the series, don't bother reading the book, because it's, the series is better. But if you haven't seen either, then, you know, maybe you could read the book, maybe you'd find it interesting, but with it in mind that it's a parody. Book 49 was On the Day on Your Life by Aubrey Marcus. This is actually really good when I was reading it, obviously listening to it on Audible. It's all about like, how can you live the best day of your life? What would you do? Like, you know, if you woke up tomorrow and you wanted to live your best day, what would you do? Obviously something that's feasible, what could make your life the best day that it could be, within the constraints of actually having to live your life as usual. And so it's almost like, it kind of breaks it down into like, okay, look at fitness, look at nutrition, look at like, what are you actually doing with your time? If you've got dead time, can you replace that dead time with something? And kind of like trying to reconnect with our kind of child roots of being playful, and kind of, you know, going to work and being playful at work and stuff like that, rather than being so serious all the time and taking everything so like stressfully. So it was kind of good in that sense. And when I was listening to it, I was really pumped, and I was really like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. And my diet when I was reading that book was like amazing. I was like so healthy, and I was exercising a lot and stuff. And as soon as I stopped listening to it, it kind of just like faded away. I think it's one of those books that you have to just keep listening to or keep reading. I wrote loads of notes when I was listening to it, because there's a lot of stuff on nutrition and things. It's quite helpful, like things like not having caffeine first thing in the morning, because it goes straight to your adrenal glands, and adrenal glands release cortisol, so your body's in like stress alert because you've had coffee in the morning, and that's creating like anxiety. So you should really ingest some fat with the coffee so that it slows down the release of the caffeine. So just little tips like that are kind of really useful. So yeah, it's really good, and he's like, I've watched him on Impact Theory, like talking about just, you know, things such as what he writes about in his book. He's just really engaging, and really kind of, he's one of those people that you just want to be mates with, because, you know, he seems pretty cool. He's a little bit crude or a little bit immature in the way that he describes sex and stuff like that, but aside from that, he's alright. I've just lost my place. Book 48 with Rio Ferdinand's Thinking Out Loud. Basically his wife died of cancer, and it's kind of always talking about that, and actually he comes across like really badly. He comes across like a little bit selfish, and a little bit self-obsessed, and a little bit kind of like, he just completely expected his wife to give up her entire life for him, that she was always like working towards when he'd retire, so that she could live a happy life with him, and she died before it happened. It was just like, oh oh my god, it's like almost like a cautionary tale of don't give up your life for your partner, like, because you'll die and you won't get that happiness that you've been looking forward to. And like, yeah, it's just, don't make choices for love, like make choices that make sense to you, that's going to enhance your life, because it could all end tomorrow. So what are you waiting for? Wait on someone else, like, you know, it's not going to make you happy. So yeah, it was a little bit like, oh. And book 47, so this was like someone's, oh no it wasn't, I was all confused. No, I get that. Yeah, this was all about archetypal patterns in fairy tales. So he's a Jungian psychology, so it's all about how all the stories that we have in like literature that have been passed down orally throughout the ages are based on like our archetypes in our lives that we kind of go through. Like an example, like it was Jordan Peterson that got me onto it actually, because he was talking about how in Little Mermaid, you know, everyone's always talking about how it's very sexist, it's like gender stereotypes, whatever, but they're missing what it's actually about. The water in Little Mermaid is the unconscious mind, and Ariel is the feminine part of her personality. That, you know, she has a voice, but she doesn't, like, she's stuck within the unconscious mind, so she doesn't have a voice outside that unconscious mind. And then you've got the masculine aspect, so Prince Eric, who's outside even the conscious mind. He's like going about life or whatever, and how Ariel has to have like the battle with Ursula, and they bring up all the ships from below the water, which is the path to enlightenment. So when you go into your unconscious mind, you can bring up all your shit from when you were younger, and you try and deal with that, have that kind of battle and stuff. And then when you've done that, you get your voice back after obviously giving it away. You get that voice back and you unite as one kind of mind, one personality. Uranus and your anima take on together, and you dissolve gender stereotypes, and you become like a fully functioning human being who's aware of their unconscious motives and drives. So actually it's really interesting. And it's not to do about gender, you know, stereotypes at all. So this was talking about how like the hero's journey. This one talks about actually what happens in like Tolkien, you know, with the ring. It's almost like you've got to go on the hero's journey. There's a calling, you get a calling, you've got to go on that journey, and destroy something to then come out of it successful, or save part of your personality, which is the damsel in distress kind of motif. Really fascinating when you look at it that way. I mean, I'm not doing it justice explaining it, but it was it says here the discussion of how isolation must be on your own can result in a drowning in your unconscious mind. And how you, because of that, your shadow can serve as its evil. Because your shadow is like the opposite part of you that you've rejected. So again, you try to uncover that in your journey to enlightenment. It's very interesting. There's a lot of like spiritual shit that's been passed out that people don't see any parallels in, don't kind of think maybe there's something in that. Maybe, you know, the fact that it's survived thousands of years, there must be something that tells us about our minds. Like surely it must do. Book 46 I read was Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, which was weird because like he was did he write Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? I think he did, which again, like, it's not that good, like, when you read it, like, it's a good film, really good premise and plot and stuff, but it's not actually that good. But I think I watched a documentary that was saying it was about how it was the body snatchers that brought the bodies in, and then they dissected them and operated on them and then took them out. So they went in the front door and then went out the back door and then got rid of the bones and stuff. So it's supposed to be symbolic of that or something, but I don't obviously like look at the context behind that, but I can't remember what it was, but there's obviously more to that story than it's there, but this one is Treasure Island basically. So people go to an island to get treasure, there's pirates there, they kill the pirates, they get the treasure and come home, and that's it. That's one of my mum's like old childhood books, and I've been wanting to read it for ages, that and like Robinson Crusoe, but since I've read this one now I don't think I want to read Robinson Crusoe. And I was really confused as well because I thought it was Gulliver's Travels, and Gulliver's Travels is supposed to be quite symbolic and stuff, so I kind of had to read that, but it wasn't that.